I want everyone off this land now. The man in a navy blue HOA vest screamed, standing on a bulldozer that had just plowed through my fence gate like it was a piece of paper. Behind him were 6 more bulldozers, all lined up along the hill. The lead bulldozer had already started tearing down the barn my great-grandfather built with his bare hands in 1941. I ran toward them, waving my arms. "What are you doing? This is my land." He jumped off the bulldozer, smirking. "Correction was your land. It was auctioned last week. The new owners want to build a tennis court here." My jaw dropped. "Auctioned by who?" He pulled a paper from his clipboard, barely glancing at it. "The HOA took possession due to unpaid assessments. It's legal. You'll have to take it up with the city. Good luck with that." I snatched the paper from his hand. "This is a lie. I don't even live under your HOA. This land has never been part of your association." But it didn't matter. In a matter of minutes, they had set up fences, brought in trucks, and started marking the land with red flags and ropes. I stood frozen, staring at what had just begun. That was the day the Homeowners Association illegally sold all 1,800 acres of my ranch, and they had no idea I was about to legally sell their homes. But first, I had to get the proof. Let's rewind. My name is Jake Walker. I'm 38 years old, a retired military engineer, and the proud owner of Cedar Valley Ranch, 1,800 acres of forest fields and freshwater lakes that had been in my family for 4 generations. The land sits just outside a fancy HOA development called Maple Heights. It's one of those over-polished neighborhoods where people drive golf carts more than actual cars, and the HOA fines you $200 if your grass is half an inch too high. The truth is, I had nothing to do with them. My land was older than their subdivision. Their houses came nearly 40 years after Cedar Valley Ranch was already marked and deeded. But for years, they had tried to claim I was part of their HOA. They sent me letters, fines, and even violation notices for things like cows being too loud or barns being a visual disturbance. I ignored them all. I thought it was just empty noise. Then came the new HOA president, Claire Benson. Claire was the type of woman who wore heels to walk her dog and called police if your fence color wasn't neutral enough. She had recently been elected after the last HOA president retired and immediately set out to beautify the region. I didn't know this meant bulldozing history. One morning, my neighbor Patrick, who lived right on the edge of Maple Heights, knocked on my door looking nervous. "Jake, man, I just got this letter," he said, waving an envelope. "It says the HOA is expanding its authority, says they're incorporating buffer zones into their jurisdiction, and you're on the map." I raised an eyebrow. "Buffer zones?" "Yeah, apparently they passed a new charter with the county. There was a meeting last week. You weren't invited." "Of course I wasn't invited," I muttered. "I'm not part of their fairy tale kingdom." Patrick scratched his head. "You might want to check this out. People are talking. Real estate agents have been seen around here." That was the first red flag, but I brushed it off. How could they possibly claim land that had been in my family since 1904? Then 2 weeks later, my cousin Drew called me furious. "Jake, are you selling the ranch?" he asked. "Number why?" "There's a flyer right here in front of me. HOA of Maple Heights is promoting new development on pristine ranch land, zoned and approved for luxury properties. And your pond is on the photo." I jumped in my truck and drove to the Maple Heights office myself. That's where I met Claire in person. "I'd like to know why my land is on your development flyer," I said calmly. Claire didn't look up from her computer. "Sir, everything we do is by the law. If your land was properly maintained and in compliance, maybe you'd be part of the community instead of a nuisance." I felt the heat rising in my chest. "This land is not yours. It's not part of your HOA. I have the original deed signed in 1904 by the governor of this state." She gave me a fake smile. "Feel free to challenge it in court, but I think you'll find we're quite organized." I left that office shaking with rage, but I didn't go home. I went to the county registrar's office, and that's when I found the forged paperwork. Someone had submitted a corrected boundary map claiming that Cedar Valley Ranch was now part of Maple Heights HOA as of 5 months ago. The form was signed electronically. The signature, J.M. Walker. I never signed it. I don't even have a middle name. I stared at the screen, heart racing. It was a well-executed con. They had faked my identity and filed altered documents to claim my land. Then they passed it off at an auction under the radar. And the worst part, the buyers were already moving in under false ownership. I knew I couldn't fight them with yelling. I had to be smarter, legal, precise. So I called my lawyer, Helen Brooks. She was sharp, fierce, and used to be a judge. When she saw the paperwork, she raised an eyebrow. "Jake, this is bigger than you think. Whoever did this committed felony-level fraud, but proving it will take time." "I don't want time," I said. "I want justice." She leaned back in her chair. "Then we hit them where it hurts." "What do you mean?" She smiled. "Did you know Maple Heights HOA sits on a parcel of land that was actually owned by a private developer until recently, and that developer defaulted on taxes? It's now a public lien, which means the land under the HOA properties is technically for sale at tax auction next month." I blinked. "Wait, so you're saying?" "I'm saying if you have the right paperwork and some quick financing, we can buy the land under their homes." And that's exactly what we did. I scraped together every dollar I had, sold off some cattle, liquidated savings, and in a quiet online auction that lasted 7 minutes, I legally bought the 75-acre parcel under Maple Heights HOA. Every home, every garden, every pool. They still owned their houses, but not the land beneath them. And I wasn't done yet. I filed a notice of land use change, a private agricultural ranch. No residential leasing permitted. They would need to move out or pay me rent, very, very high rent. And just when I was getting ready to serve the official notices, I got a knock on my door. It was Claire. This time she wasn't smiling. "We need to talk," she said through clenched teeth. I held up my phone, already recording. "Sure, let's talk." But before she could respond, the sheriff's cruiser pulled into my driveway. Sirens on. 2 deputies stepped out, heading straight for her, and what they said next shocked even me. "Claude Benson," the taller deputy called out, walking toward her with purpose. "You are under investigation for filing fraudulent land documents and impersonating a property owner." Claire froze, her face draining of color. "What?" "No, there must be a mistake. I'm the president of the HOA. I don't even know what this is about." But the other deputy was already reading her rights. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." I stepped back and folded my arms, watching her mouth fall open in panic. Her designer purse slipped from her shoulder, and she stumbled slightly as they led her toward the cruiser. "You can't do this," she shrieked. "This land is part of our HOA charter. You're making a huge mistake." The taller deputy glanced at me, then at the recording on my phone. "Not according to the evidence we received from Mr. Walker here. Turns out someone forged his signature and submitted fraudulent documents to the registrar's office." Claire's eyes shot to me like daggers, but I didn't say a word. I just kept recording. As they placed her in the back of the cruiser and shut the door, she started yelling again. "This is not over. You can't take Maple Heights away from us." But she was wrong because I already had. Still, even with Claire out of the picture, for now, this war was far from over. Her cronies in the HOA weren't giving up so easily. The vice president, a man named Todd Granger, sent me a very polite but threatening letter the very next day. "Dear Mr. Walker," it began, "we are aware of recent misunderstandings between you and the HOA board. In the interest of peace and community, we request a private meeting to resolve matters amicably before they escalate further. Hiding behind a maze of corporations and international protections." But his shadow still hung over my ranch like a storm cloud. Max barked more often at night now. The air had a tension to it, like something was coming. I wasn't paranoid, I was prepared. I installed floodlights across the property, set up CCTV with satellite backups, even upgraded the alarm system in the cabin. But it wasn't enough because one night around 2:13 a.m., I woke up to a loud crack outside. Not a twig, not an animal, a gunshot. I rolled out of bed and crawled to the floor, heart racing, grabbing the shotgun I kept hidden beneath the dresser. Max growled from the corner, his hackles raised. I flipped off the lights and crawled to the window. There on the edge of the tree line near the south field was a flash of movement. 2 figures, one holding something long, either a rifle or a camera. I couldn't tell which. I activated the emergency lights remotely, and floodlights lit up the entire field. The figures bolted. I chased after them barefoot, Max flying past me like a bullet. But by the time I reached the edge of the clearing, they were gone, vanished into the night. Whoever they were, they knew the land. They moved like they'd studied it. The next morning, I checked the cameras. All footage had gone black for exactly 3 minutes. The same 3 minutes during the gunshot. Someone had jammed the signal. Langley's warning echoed in my mind. You've won the land, but not the war. This wasn't over. It had just changed shape. I called Helen. They're testing me, whoever they are. She sighed. I think it's time we go federal. Homeland Security has been investigating Langley's offshore activities. They might be able to help. I agreed. 2 days later, 2 federal agents arrived. Agent Monroe and Agent Phillips, calm, clean-cut, and extremely serious. They walked the ranch with me, took notes, asked questions. Then Agent Monroe looked me in the eye and said, "We believe Langley isn't working alone. He's part of a larger network of investors and former developers who specialize in flipping land illegally across the country. Fake auctions, forged zoning, threats, sabotage." "You mean I'm not the only one?" I asked. Monroe nodded. "You're the only one who fought back and won. That's why they're targeting you." It made sense. Langley's people weren't just trying to take my ranch anymore. They were trying to destroy my reputation, to make an example of me. But if they thought I would bend, they clearly hadn't studied my past. Before I inherited Cedar Valley Ranch, I served as an Army Corps engineer in Afghanistan. I built bridges under sniper fire, fortified outposts under the threat of IEDs. Surviving meant being smarter, faster, and always 2 steps ahead. So I used those same skills. I mapped out the ranch like a fortress. I trained my ranch hands and volunteers in safety drills, legal defense, even radio comms in case of another blackout. And then I set a trap. Using an old shipping container and some clever trickery, I made it look like a brand new communications hub was being built at the far edge of the ranch. I placed sensitive land use records inside it, completely fake, of course, and left it lightly guarded. Sure enough, 2 nights later, the trap was sprung. Motion sensors picked up movement. Someone cut the perimeter fence again and made their way to the decoy container. But this time, they weren't alone. They brought equipment, jammers, bolt cutters, a drone. As soon as they stepped inside, I locked the door remotely. Steel enforced, no way out. By the time they realized what was happening, Monroe and Phillips were already racing in with backup from the sheriff's department. It was over in under 10 minutes. They caught 4 men. 3 were from out of state. One, shockingly, was the Maple Heights treasurer, the same guy who used to write HOA checks for pool upgrades. He immediately confessed. They'd been paid to find and destroy any physical records or backups of the land fraud scandal. Their orders came straight from Langley's newest puppet, an offshore shell company set up in the Cayman Islands. Langley had changed the game again. But what he didn't know was so had I, because 2 days before that trap, I had finalized a contract with the National Documentary Team. A 5-part series was now in production titled Ranch vs. HOA, The Fight for American Land. The team had interviewed over 50 people, including Maple Heights residents, former HOA board members, and whistleblowers from Langley's own empire. The teaser dropped on YouTube and hit 1 million views in 24 hours. Langley's name trended for all the wrong reasons. Suddenly, lawmakers were calling. Journalists were digging. Other victims of similar land grabs were coming forward. And best of all, a federal judge placed a temporary freeze on all Langley-owned accounts and properties, pending the ongoing investigation. The man who once tried to steal my ranch with forged maps and fake auctions was now watching his empire collapse in real time. But even as the world turned on him, he sent me one final message. An envelope, no return address. Inside was a single photo of me standing in front of my barn, taken weeks ago before the fire, written on the back in red ink. This isn't about land anymore. I handed the photo to Monroe without a word. He looked at me and said, "We'll put him away, I promise." But deep down, I knew. Langley wouldn't stop until one of us lost everything, and I had no plans to lose. The day after the photo arrived, I stood on the porch of my cabin, staring out over the land. My land. But the air felt heavier now. The war wasn't about boundaries anymore. It was personal. Langley had crossed a line, and I knew he wasn't finished. The man had resources, people, and money that moved in the shadows. But what he didn't have was purpose. That's what made him dangerous, and what made me stronger, because I had something worth protecting. Cedar Valley Ranch wasn't just dirt and grass. It was heritage. It was the soul of my family, the last memory of my grandfather, the blood, sweat, and scars of everyone who came before me. And I was done playing defense, so I got proactive. I started working with Monroe and Phillips to build an airtight case. More whistleblowers had come forward, former HOA managers in other states, landowners who'd lost everything, people who'd been threatened into silence. They called it the Langley Web, a massive illegal operation wrapped up in land laundering, tax evasion, and political manipulation. It turned out Langley's game had been going on for over 15 years, and now it was unraveling. One by one, cities reopened cases that were previously settled. Fines that had been paid off vanished. Politicians resigned. Langley's empire was crumbling, but he wasn't going down quietly. One night while walking the outer field with Max, I spotted a figure crouching near my new well pump. I kept my distance, stayed in the shadows, and radioed the team. I watched as the man tried to sabotage the pump, pulling wires and pouring what looked like bleach into the tank. Within seconds, Monroe and 2 deputies closed in. The man tried to run, but didn't get far. He wasn't just some random vandal. He was a private security contractor employed through one of Langley's shell companies. When they searched his van, they found blueprints of my property, surveillance photos, and a burner phone full of messages from a contact listed only as L. That was all the evidence we needed. Langley was hit with federal racketeering charges. Warrants went out internationally. The U.S. State Department issued notices to freeze his foreign assets. Every property under his control, every mansion, every office, every hidden ranch was now under federal review. But even with the legal news tightening, the psychological games didn't stop. Every morning for the next week, I found something strange at the edge of my fence line. Day 1, a single white glove nailed to a post. Day 2, a dead crow. Day 3, a page torn from a book about land rights circled in red ink. Day 4, a child's toy burnt. Each item was left at a different corner of the ranch. Each one meant to send a message. You are being watched. But they didn't scare me. They fueled me. I took photos of every item, turned them over to Monroe, and kept moving forward. Because while Langley tried to rattle me with shadows, I was preparing a legacy. I launched a new nonprofit with Helen and Patrick, the Ranch Watch Foundation. It was built to protect small landowners from predatory developments and fraudulent HOA practices. We started with just 10 members. Within 3 weeks, we had over 2,000 stories flooded in from people in Georgia, Texas, Arizona, and California. Ranchers, veterans, elderly couples, all victims of scams, intimidation, and stolen land. Our mission went viral. National talk shows called. A senator reached out. Even the Department of Justice invited me to a private briefing on rural land protection policy. And then, as if the universe itself was turning the tide, the final blow landed. Langley was caught trying to board a private jet in Beas. He had disguised himself, used a fake passport, but a local journalist tipped off Interpol. They arrested him with $1.2 million in cash, forged IDs, encrypted hard drives, and a handwritten list of properties marked for urgent acquisition. Number 7 on that list, Cedar Valley Ranch. The U.S. arranged extradition. Langley was flown to D.C. in shackles, his face all over the news. The man who tried to erase my legacy was now facing life in prison. When Monroe came to the ranch that night, he didn't speak for a long time. We just sat on the porch watching the stars, Max snoring at our feet. Then he finally said, "Jake, we've been chasing this guy for years. But you did what we couldn't. You held your ground." I didn't respond right away. Instead, I reached into my jacket and pulled out something I'd been holding on to. Langley's photo, the one he mailed me with the message on the back. I dropped it into the fire pit, watched it burn. "This land doesn't belong to fear," I said. Monroe nodded. "What now?" I looked out over the fields. I rebuild. I open the gates, and I make sure no one ever forgets what happened here. But just before he left, Monroe handed me a small envelope from Langley confiscated from his belongings. Inside was a final letter. It read, "I underestimated you. Most men would have folded. You didn't. I lost the game, but you lost something too. One day you'll feel it. One day you'll look at your ranch and wonder if it was worth the cost." I folded the letter, placed it back into the envelope, and threw it into the same fire. Because Langley was wrong, I didn't lose anything. I won everything that mattered, and the cost was worth every flame, every threat, every drop of sweat, because Cedar Valley Ranch was mine. Forever, 6 months later, the sun rose gently over Cedar Valley Ranch like it always had. But this time, the air was different, lighter, peaceful. The scars were still there, of course. The blackened soil where the barn once stood, the old fence post that had been replaced, the bullet hole I'd never repaired in the water tower wall. But those scars had become part of the story. A story of standing tall when powerful men tried to break you. A story of fighting for something rooted deep in family and soil and memory. The ranch had not only survived, it had thrived. And now it was alive again. We hosted weekend markets with fresh produce, horseback trail rides for veterans, and children's summer camps where city kids learned how to fish and care for goats. The documentary released on Netflix as a limited series and was nominated for an Emmy. I even got asked to speak at a national landowners conference in Austin. Me, just a rancher who refused to roll over. The Ranch Watch Foundation had grown into a national movement, lobbying for stronger land protection laws. Helen became its legal director. Patrick became our public face, and I quietly remained in the background, right where I felt most at home. Still working, still fixing fences, still running the land, and still keeping an eye on the horizon. Langley's trial had begun in Washington. The charges were stacked high: fraud, racketeering, attempted bribery, conspiracy, and destruction of property. The evidence was bulletproof. Sandy Millworth testified. So did Claire and Todd, both flipping on him to save their own skin. He tried to claim innocence, said he was framed, manipulated, a victim of corporate sabotage, but no one believed him anymore, especially not after a federal investigator revealed encrypted voice memos from Langley's phone. One of them, cold, clear, unmistakable, was him saying, "Cedar Valley will burn if he doesn't give it up. We've done it before. We'll do it again." It was played in court. Jaws dropped. Langley's smirk disappeared. The jury convicted him on all counts. Sentenced 42 years without parole. His fortune was seized, his empire dismantled, and most of all, his fear-based influence evaporated. And yet that didn't mean life went back to normal, because some things don't just go away. One late evening, I sat under the porch, watching the sky turn from orange to indigo. Max lay beside me, older now, but still loyal, his ears twitching to every rustle in the grass. Then headlights appeared in the distance. A single car, a dusty black SUV. My chest tensed for a second. Old instincts, but when it pulled up and the door opened, I relaxed. It was Mrs. Bennett, the sweet elderly woman from Maple Heights who used to bake cookies for the whole block. She stepped out slowly, holding a pie tin wrapped in foil. "Apple," she smiled. "I made too much. Thought you might like a slice." I grinned and stood to help her up the steps. "You always know how to make a man's day, Mrs. Butt." We sat quietly on the porch, sharing the pie as the sun disappeared behind the trees. "You know," she said softly, "when they told us you'd bought the land under our homes, I was scared. I thought we'd be homeless, that we were doomed." I nodded. "I remember. But you didn't throw us out. You didn't do what they did to you." "No," I said, "because that's not who we are. And revenge that hurts the innocent isn't justice. It's just more hurt." She smiled and patted my hand. "Your grandpa would be proud. You turned pain into purpose." I looked out over the field again, toward the rebuilt barn, the grazing horses, the laughter of kids echoing from the far paddocks. "I didn't do it alone," I said. "People stood with me, and now others will too," she said, "because your story gave them hope." That night after Mrs. Bennett left, I went into the study and pulled out something I hadn't touched in months. A leather journal, my grandfather's. Inside were old sketches of the ranch, notes about crops and seasons, and one short line written in blocky letters on the first page. Don't let anyone take what you're meant to protect. That had been my compass, and now it was my oath. As the wind rustled through the window, I closed the journal and turned off the light. I had fought billionaires, corrupt politicians, and a criminal enterprise just to keep this land. But in doing so, I had protected more than soil and trees. I had protected legacy, honor, community, and something even deeper. The idea that one person, just one, can still stand up, say no, and change everything. So if you're listening to this and you're facing your own version of Langley, maybe not a ranch, maybe not land, but something that matters, something someone is trying to take from you, just remember, you don't need to be powerful. You just need to stand. Because sometimes that's all it takes to win the war. And me? Well, I'm still here. Cedar Valley Ranch, stronger than ever, ready for whatever comes next.